The hall is vast. Stone walls echo with the silence of centuries, as though they have been waiting patiently for a gathering that never ends. At the center stretches a table so long it disappears into shadow. Candles burn, but not with ordinary fire. Their flames bend and twist as if breathing from a source unseen. At the head of this table sits the empath, not crowned, not armored, not chosen, yet placed silently, as if destiny itself required them to be seated where all light must converge. The feast is not food. It is not wine. It is presence, warmth, the invisible nourishment of soul made flesh. And around them the figures gather, faces half hidden in the dark. Some smile, some laugh, some weep, as though rehearsing sorrow. But their eyes reveal what their masks conceal. Hunger. A hunger not for bread, but for radiance. Carl Jung warned that what the unconscious cannot create, it must consume. When the self is hollow, it cannot feed itself. It reaches outward, seizing vitality from whatever light burns nearest. The empath's tragedy is to shine in a room that feeds in secret. This is the banquet in the dark hall. And for many who live as empaths, the recognition comes late. Years pass before they see the ritual for what it is. The exhaustion, the inexplicable heaviness, the patterns of being drained until their very bones hum with fatigue. It is not random. It is ceremony, a feeding. The table is symbolic, but the hunger is real. You have felt it, the way some people arrive in your life with the air of starving pilgrims, dressed in need, cloaked in affection, but feeding at your flame until you dim. They take not by force, but by presence, as though the act of sitting near you entitles them to your warmth. In Jungian terms, the empath unconsciously becomes both priest and prisoner of this ritual. Priest because they offer the sacred meal, love, attention, understanding, compassion. Prisoner because they never leave the table, chained by the invisible commandment that to deny another's hunger is to betray their very identity. The shadows in this hall are not strangers. They are archetypes. They are the eternal guests who arrive at every banquet where light shines without protection. The dependent one, the critic, the victim, the charmer. Each plays a role in the sacred theater of hunger. They take their turns, bow to the invisible script, and the empath gives, unaware that the feast will never end, that no amount of bread will satisfy the devourer who cannot cook his own meal. Jung's language was clinical, but beneath it pulsed a myth that if the unconscious does not awaken, it repeats. What cannot be transformed is performed, over and over, until recognition cracks the spell. And so the empath lives half a lifetime thinking this endless feast is love, loyalty, duty. They fail to see that they are not guest, but offering. The banquet grows darker as time stretches. What once felt noble, giving endlessly, listening patiently, absorbing the storms of others, begins to corrode. The empath ages in spirit, not from years, but from depletion. Their body remains, but their eyes dim. They are being eaten, not literally, but psychically, their vitality becoming the silent bread of the hall. The tragedy is not only that they give, it is that they do not know there is a choice. To shine seems synonymous with surrender. To withdraw light feels like death itself. And so the ritual continues. But here, in this darkness, Jung's warning flickers like a hidden candle. If you do not claim your own flame, the world will consume it in secret. This imagery may feel haunting. Perhaps it feels familiar. Because many who find themselves drawn to the language of Jung, to the deep waters of philosophy, have sat at this table in some form. They know the fatigue that does not sleep away. They know the friendships, relationships, even families where presence feels like currency and the price is always rising. They know what it means to walk away from a gathering more hollow than when they entered. And yet, like dreamers unable to awaken, they return. Why? Because light knows no other way but to shine. And without awareness, it burns even for those who would extinguish it. 5 minutes have passed in this reflection. If these words are stirring something within you, if you feel seen, as though this imagery is not story but mirror, then this channel is a place built for that recognition, for journeys into shadow, into silence, into the language beneath ordinary speech. Consider subscribing, not as a gesture to me, but as a vow to yourself, that your hunger for depth, for psychological clarity, will not starve in a world of shallow noise. Let this act be part of your individuation, the conscious choice to feed the self before the feast of shadows. Now return with me to the hall. Notice how the empath's chair is not chosen but assigned. They did not ask to sit at the head, yet there they are. This too is archetypal. The empath often becomes the axis of a group, a family, a friendship circle, the one everyone leans toward instinctively, not out of reverence, but out of hunger. The light attracts without trying. The paradox is cruel. What is most natural for the empath is most dangerous. Their openness, their porous boundary, their radiant attention, these are both their gift and their cage. Without shadow work, without awareness, they become the sacrificial lamb dressed as priest. The hall grows louder. The shadows laugh, argue, cry. Their performance intensifies. Each demands attention in a different language: pity, admiration, crisis, flattery. The empath responds to each like a conductor, keeping harmony in a discordant orchestra. Yet what remains when the music fades? The empath's silence, the aching weight of depletion, the sense that they have lived another day, not for themselves, but as sustenance for others. Jung might say this is the fate of the unindividuated self, to live as function, not essence, to serve as extension of others' unconscious hunger, to confuse survival with sacrifice. But the image of the banquet is not only tragedy, it is revelation. For only when one sees the hall for what it is, the ritual of theft disguised as love, does the possibility of awakening appear. Recognition is the first step in individuation. The empath must see the shadows not as villains alone, but as mirrors of what happens when one refuses to generate their own flame. The banquet is not merely an external event, it is inner drama. The empath feeds others outwardly, but inwardly they too resist their own hunger. They deny themselves, repress their desires, silence their rage. And in that denial, their shadow waits, growing hungrier with every sacrifice. The hall is a psychic theater. The shadows are not only others, they are also us. And so part 1 closes not with resolution, but with unease. The empath sits still, unaware of the chains. The banquet continues, the laughter rises, the masks glimmer. Yet something has shifted. For once a truth is spoken, even symbolically, it cannot be forgotten. The flame flickers, awareness whispers, and though the empath does not yet rise, a seed is planted. Recognition begins its quiet work.
The banquet continues. The table stretches on, the candles bend their light like reeds in the wind, and the empath still sits, unaware of the weight of their throne. Yet, as our gaze sharpens, the shadows at the table begin to change. Their faces shift. Some blur, some fracture, some dissolve and reassemble. What once appeared as simple guests are revealed now as actors, each clothed in a mask that tells a story older than memory. For what is hunger without disguise? What is theft without theater? To drain the light of another requires not force, but performance. And so, the archetypal masks emerge, each crafted by the unconscious as both shield and weapon. The first mask, the helpless one. The first mask trembles, its eyes glisten as though the world has wronged it beyond measure. Every breath seems to whisper, "Help me, save me. Without you, I will perish." This is the archetype of the victim, the dependent one. Jung would say it is the infantile shadow, an ego unable to feed itself, projecting nourishment onto another. And to the empath, this mask is irresistible. For what heart, trained since childhood to soothe, can turn away from such suffering? But notice, the mask is not simply pain, it is performance. Its tears are currency, its silence a snare. The empath feels not only compassion, but compulsion, as if their very existence is on trial. If I do not rescue, am I still good? Thus, the feast begins with pity as the spoon, and the empath, unaware, feeds the helpless one with endless attention, endless energy, endless presence. Yet the hunger remains bottomless. The second mask across the table grins. Its teeth gleam, its eyes sparkle with a warmth that feels like sunlight after years of winter. This is the charmer, the seducer of attention. It does not beg, it celebrates, it intoxicates, it flatters the empath until they shine even brighter, only to consume the glow they helped ignite. Jung called this projection of the anima, or animus, the unconscious ideal, the imagined soulmate reflected back to us. The empath, hungering for recognition, cannot help but lean closer. They believe they have been seen, at last. But what they have been shown is not recognition. It is reflection, crafted to extract devotion. The charmer's mask is dangerous not because it wounds, but because it delights. And the empath, unused to delight, confuses intoxication with intimacy. They surrender their flame willingly, unaware that joy, too, can be a trap. Then the third mask appears. Further down the table, a harsher mask glares. Its eyes are cold, its lips thin with disapproval. This is the critic, the judge, the eternal examiner of worth. Every empath knows this mask, often born in the earliest chambers of childhood. The parent, the teacher, the authority who could never be satisfied. The critic drains light not by begging or flattering, but by demanding perfection. Every mistake the empath makes, every silence, every delay becomes evidence against them. The empath responds, as they always have, by overgiving, by trying harder, by burning brighter, hoping to silence the criticism with devotion. But the critic never rests. Its hunger is infinite, for it does not seek nourishment, it seeks dominance. Here, Jung's warning returns. What remains unconscious in the parent becomes the prison of the child. The empath who faced criticism without mercy now repeats the pattern in adulthood, finding judges wherever they go, still trying to pass the test that never ends. And then another mask appears, paradoxical, radiant. This is the savior, the one who insists, "I am here for you, I will heal you, I will guide you." At first, it seems the empath has met their mirror, another giver, another healer. But look deeper. The savior feeds not by taking directly, but by keeping the empath perpetually broken. For if the empath heals, the savior's role dissolves. So they maintain the wound, softly, kindly, subtly. They offer just enough balm to keep the empath dependent, but never enough to set them free. This is the archetypal false healer, the shadow of the archetype of the wise old man. Instead of wisdom, manipulation cloaked in compassion. The empath remains at the banquet, chained by gratitude, believing they owe the Savior their light. In truth, they are being taught to remain in pieces so another may feel whole. And so the masks multiply. The victim, the charmer, the critic, the savior, others too, masks of rage, of silence, of laughter too loud. Each one hungers, each one feeds, each one drains, and the empath, seated still, becomes the silent altar of the ritual. But here is the insight that Jung pressed upon us. These masks are not only worn by others, they are worn by us. They are fragments of our own psyche projected outward, mirrored back in others, so we may confront what lies unclaimed in ourselves. The victim we resent is our own denied helplessness. The charmer we chase is our own buried charisma. The critic we fear is our own perfectionism, gnawing at the edges of our worth. The savior we trust too easily is our own unclaimed desire to control through kindness. To see the masks in others without recognizing them in ourselves is to remain trapped at the banquet. We will feed and be fed upon endlessly. At this point, I must pause. If these images feel heavy, if you are noticing the masks in your own life, do not turn away. This channel is a place where we look directly into the shadow, not to glorify darkness, but to reclaim the light that has been stolen. If you have not yet subscribed, consider doing so now, not for vanity, but as a ritual, a conscious act of saying, I am willing to see. I am willing to walk into the shadow, not as victim, but as seeker. The banquet scene sharpens again. Candles gutter, shadows laugh louder. The empath begins to sense the performance. They notice the tears that come too quickly, the flattery too practiced, the criticism too constant, the healing too conditional. For the first time, suspicion pierces the trance. For the first time, the empath wonders, am I not guest, but offering? This question is the crack in the mask, and through that crack, light begins to enter.
The banquet flickers. The candles sputter, the laughter bends into echoes, and suddenly the empath notices something strange. The faces across the table shimmer, as if made of smoke. The critic, the charmer, the victim, the savior, all begin to dissolve. In their place, the empath sees not strangers, but faint silhouettes of themselves. The revelation stings. The masks were never just theirs. They were mine. The archetypal mirror. Carl Jung warned, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The empath feels the weight of this truth. Every draining guest at the banquet, every mask that fed upon their light, begins to warp into archetypes of the psyche. The helpless one, a reflection of their own denied weakness. The critic, a mirror of their own perfectionism sharpened since childhood. The charmer, their own longing to be adored, repressed beneath humility. The savior, their own hunger to control others' wounds by keeping them wounded. It is unbearable, this realization, to recognize that the darkness haunting us from the outside has always dwelt inside, waiting for acknowledgement. This is the essence of the shadow. Not evil, not sin, not curse, but the forgotten, the disowned, the unintegrated. Descent into the psyche. The banquet hall vanishes. The empath now stands alone, before a mirror stretching taller than mountains, older than memory. Within its surface, faces swarm, every mask, every betrayal, every wound. To look away would be easier, but Jung's path demands the opposite. To become whole, one must descend into the underworld of the self, into the labyrinth of shadows. The empath trembles. For to confront the shadow is to risk dissolution. To admit, I am not only light. I am hunger. I am rage. I am critic. I am manipulator. This descent is not gentle. It is initiation, like Orpheus stepping into Hades, like Christ into the desert, like the shaman swallowed by the serpent. The empath is no longer guest at the banquet, but pilgrim in the abyss. Why the shadow must be seen? Without this descent, the empath remains prey. For if we cannot see our own shadow, we project it unto others. We attract the critic because we refuse to face our inner critic. We fall for the savior because we disown our desire to save. We serve the helpless because we despise our own weakness. By denying shadow, the empath unconsciously invites it, endlessly repeating the banquet. Jung taught that the greatest danger is not darkness itself, but unconsciousness. A shadow unseen rules us more completely than a tyrant we can resist. To awaken is to step into the mirror, to recognize this, too, is me. The emotional threshold. At this moment, the empath faces despair. The banquet was already unbearable. But to discover that the masks are their own, that the predators are also reflections, feels like betrayal at the deepest level. And yet, this despair is not punishment, it is a threshold. Every myth, every initiation begins with death. The empath must die, not literally, but symbolically. Their old self, the self that believed in being only light, must dissolve. Only through this symbolic death can a truer wholeness emerge. The banquet was never about exploitation alone, it was ritual, an initiation into shadow. At this point, if you are still with me, if these words resonate, if the mirror feels uncomfortably familiar, then you are not here by accident. This work is not entertainment. It is confrontation. It is shadow work disguised as story. If you have not yet subscribed, consider doing so. Not as support for me, but as a commitment to yourself. As Jung wrote, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Subscribing here is an act of defiance against fate. Cracks in the mirror. The empath breathes. They stare into the mirror. Faces snarl, grin, accuse, plead. But slowly, through the swarm of masks, a new image forms. A figure stands in the background of the reflection. Larger, calmer, undefined. It does not wear a mask. It does not feed. It does not wound. It simply waits. This is the self. The archetype Jung described as the totality of being. Neither only light nor only shadow, but the union of both. The empath glimpses it now, barely, like the first star appearing at dusk. The shadow was never meant to devour them. It was meant to lead them here, to the recognition that wholeness is not found in purity, but in integration. The critic must be welcomed, the victim held, the charmer embraced, the savior acknowledged, not in servitude, but in ownership. For what is integrated no longer enslaves. The banquet is gone. The mirror dissolves. The empath is left in silence, in darkness, in the vast emptiness of the psyche. And yet, for the first time, they do not feel, entirely powerless. The descent has begun. The descent deepens. The banquet is gone. The mirror has shattered. The empath walks through a wasteland of silence. No faces, no voices, only the echo of their own breath. At first, it feels like freedom, no one to feed upon them. But quickly, the silence becomes suffocating. It is not absence of others they now face, but absence of themselves. This is the death Jung warned of, the annihilation of the false persona, the shattering of the persona. Every human wears a mask, the persona, the face we show the world to earn approval, love, survival. For the empath, this mask was selflessness, kindness, endless availability. But the banquet stripped this mask away. The empath sees it for what it was, a performance, a survival strategy learned in childhood. Without it, they feel naked, fragile, exposed. They are no longer the good one, the healer, the saint. They are simply human, and that feels unbearable. This is why Jung described individuation as a kind of crucifixion. The old self must die so that something more authentic can be born. The archetypal death. Myth after myth tells the same story. Osiris torn into pieces, only to be reassembled. Christ crucified, descending into hell before resurrection. The shaman swallowed by the serpent, reduced to bone, then reborn with new sight. Death is not metaphorical here, it is archetypal. Every empath who awakens must pass through this annihilation. The empath feels it now. Their innocence rots. Their faith in others collapses. Their self-image of savior turns to ash. It is agony, but it is also necessity. The grief of letting go. Few speak of the grief that comes with individuation. To admit, I am not who I thought I was, is to lose not just illusions, but entire lifetimes of identity. The empath mourns the years spent feeding others, the childhood where they learned love meant self-erasure, the trust given to those who drained them dry. Grief pours in waves. Rage follows grief. Emptiness follows rage. This emptiness is not failure. It is initiation, the hollowing out of the vessel before new life can fill it. Why the death is necessary. If the empath clings to innocence, they remain prey. Their purity becomes bait, their goodness a leash, their compassion a weapon turned against them. Only by dying to innocence, by accepting that they too carry shadow, hunger, rage, can they become whole. And wholeness is the one thing no narcissist can consume. This is why Jung insisted that there is no coming to consciousness without pain. Pain is the scalpel that cuts away illusion. Emotional function of this passage. The empath standing in symbolic death feels stripped of meaning. But this passage is designed to break the heart open, to strip the viewer not just of illusions about narcissists, but illusions about themselves. It is meant to trigger grief, but also catharsis. For when innocence dies, truth can be born. The quiet threshold. The empath kneels in the silence of their own soul. No banquet, no mirror, no mask. And then a faint stirring, a spark barely visible in the ashes. It is not yet strength. It is not yet rebirth. It is simply presence. The self, the deep, unshakable core of being, whispers, "You survived the death. Now you are ready to be reborn." The empath does not rise yet, but they breathe, and the breath is enough. The silence stretches. For a long time, there is nothing. But within the nothingness, a seed stirs. The empath, who once gave themselves away until they vanished, now feels the faint pulse of something indestructible. Not a mask, not a role, not a duty. It is the self, the center Jung called both the goal and the origin of individuation. The emergence of the shadow-integrated self. Once, the empath believed their shadow was their enemy, their anger, their hunger, their capacity for selfishness. They buried it to appear good. Now they understand. The shadow is not corruption, it is energy. Rage becomes boundary, hunger becomes self-respect, darkness becomes death. The empath no longer denies their capacity for destruction. They integrate it, and in doing so, they are no longer manipulable. No narcissist can threaten what has already died, no predator can shame what has already embraced its own darkness. Archetypal rebirth. Every myth promised this moment: the phoenix rising from ash, the shaman reborn with eyes that see through illusion, the warrior descending into the underworld only to return with fire. The empath becomes that myth. They are not the banquet's feast anymore, they are the one who leaves the table standing while the predators wither from their own starvation. A new relationship with power. The empath once believed power was poison, belonging only to narcissists and abusers. But this was illusion. Power is neutral. Power is the capacity to shape one's life, to protect one's soul, to choose with clarity. What makes power toxic is not its existence, but its distortion. Now the empath claims power without apology. They wield it not for domination, but for sovereignty. This shift terrifies the narcissist because the one they fed upon has become the one they can no longer touch. The self as anchor. Jung taught that individuation ends not in perfection, but in wholeness. The empath has become whole. They are not purely light nor purely dark. They are the union of both, the paradox incarnate. And from this wholeness arises an unshakable stillness, a groundedness that cannot be seduced, guilted, or devoured. The empath is no longer searching for approval. They are listening to the quiet voice of the self which whispers only one truth: you are enough as you are. This segment is meant to feel like breath after suffocation, dawn after endless night. The viewer should feel not just relief, but empowerment, a recognition that survival is not the end, rebirth is. It is the catharsis of realizing, I was never powerless. I was only unclaimed by myself. The banquet has ended. The mirror has shattered. The false innocence has died. And from the ruins, the empath emerges, not as prey, not as savior, but as self. Carl Jung's warning was never meant to frighten, it was meant to awaken. That light without shadow becomes a beacon for predators, but light that has embraced its darkness becomes untouchable. To every empath listening, remember, your silence, your boundaries, your wholeness, these are the forces that break the narcissist in ways words never could. And from this day forward, your light is yours alone.